Hello, ghouls. Welcome to episode 42 of the Shrouded in Darkness podcast, where we shine a light on the cases that the world forgot. This is your true crime obsessed host, Marlena. Before we dive in, why don't you catch me up on your life? Where are we going? What are we learning? How are we spending our time? The ghouls behind the podcast are staying busy with work, research, writing, and snacks. Which reminds me, let's do some shameless self-promoting. I've mentioned this before, but I'll share again that I've published a few books on Amazon under my maiden name, Marlena Smith. The titles include Ella, The Power of Love, A Momentary Glance, and The Intruder. I've also created some pretty journals and notebooks, and you can find all of these on Amazon. We also have our snack company called 3 Bears Snacks, and that's the number 3. We specialize in freeze-dried and dehydrated treats, and some of our more recent products include freeze-dried tomatoes, green beans, blue shark gummies, and gummy bears. You can find all these things on Facebook and Instagram. You can also message me for more details at shroudedindarknesspodcast@gmail.com. Now, let's get into today's case. We're visiting Cleveland, Ohio, and ghouls, let me prepare you. This one is gruesome and unsolved. Our sources for today include Haunted American History, the Scams, Money, and Murder podcast, and the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. Let me give you a little background information first. Our crimes happened between 1934 and 1938. So, of course, we're very limited with forensic testing and technology. Bear that in mind as we go through this. And like I said, our location is Cleveland, and this is during the Great Depression, so times were really hard for the working class. People were struggling and poverty was extreme. There's one specific area of Cleveland where we see a lot of things happen. It's called Kingsbury Run. This is near or maybe even connected to Lake Erie, just in case you needed some kind of geography lesson. There is a ravine, river, some train tracks, a homeless camp, and so on. This is all within that area. So it's September of 1934. Frank Lagasse lives near Lake Erie and often visits the lake to retrieve driftwood and such to warm his home. On the 5th of September, he discovers parts of a female body. She'd been decapitated and her legs were severed at the knees. Those parts were nowhere to be found. Frank immediately contacted authorities. A medical examiner discovered the woman's spine had also been severed, which could only be done by a sharp knife. Due to the condition of her body, the examiner is unable to determine a cause of death. Her skin is covered in a type of chemical that causes a red color and a leathery feel. We know she's in her mid to late 30s, and she becomes known as the Lady in the Lake. The following year, September 23rd, a couple teenage boys were walking near a ravine, pretty sure it's that same one in Kingsbury Run, and they discovered the remains of a decapitated man. When police arrive at the scene, they find an additional victim. Both had been dismembered with their genitals severed, and there was no blood at the scene. It looks like one of the men died maybe a month prior to the other. The police continue searching the area and find missing body parts. One of those victims matched 28-year-old Edward Andersey. He worked as an orderly at a psychiatric hospital. He has a criminal history of being drunk in public and the occasional bar fight. According to a friend, Edward had been chauffeured around town by a man named Eddie. The other victim that was with Edward Andersey, he actually matched Eddie's description, but there isn't enough for a positive identification. We also find that same reddish chemical on the unknown male. One important note about one of these victims, the medical examiner is able to determine that he was decapitated while he was still breathing. So this was his official cause of death. We move ahead a few months. We're now in January of 1936. A woman finds a couple baskets behind a manufacturing plant. Inside the baskets, wrapped in newspaper, are human remains. 10 days later, more remains are found in a local parking lot. The remains all belong to the same person, and the victim is identified as Florence Palillo, a 44-year-old waitress, barmaid, and sex worker. The medical examiner is able to determine the dismembering of her body occurred after rigor mortis. So Ghouls, he dismembered the body after she was already dead. In June, we see our fifth victim. A couple boys were walking along the train tracks when they spot some brown rolled up pants near a tree. Now, bear in mind, this is during the Great Depression, so maybe they thought there was money or something of value within those pants, so they go to check it out. Only, they're traumatized when a man's head rolls out of those pants. More remains are found that following day, about maybe 1,000 feet from that original scene. The pants at the scene match the body that was found. This time, though, there are pools of blood at the scene. Remember how the other crime scenes, there was no blood at the scene, so it's almost like those were only dump sites. Also, an important note, this victim is only 800 feet from the second and third victims scene. That was the Edward Ondersea and the second unknown victim that was there. Police take a different approach to this John Doe. This one has several tattoos, which, that's often something that people use for identification. So the police display a plaster cast of the man. Now, I've seen a couple of different reports. Some say it was a plaster of his face, while others say it was more of the tattoos. But either way, he remains a John Doe. No one recognizes him. And from what I read, is like thousands of people could have saw these plasters, but no one recognized the man. So our sixth victim is found in July, so that's at that same year, 1936. A 40-year-old male that had been murdered approximately 2 months prior to being discovered. Again, we have blood at the scene, and the victim's head and bloody clothing are found only 10 feet away. We move to September 10th. The torso and legs of a man are found in a deep pool of water. Another dismemberment with exact precision. Our last known victim is discovered on June 6th, 1937. A 14-year-old boy finds a lady's skull under an area bridge. When police arrive at the scene, they find more skeletal remains nearby. Since the body was full skeletal, we know she was most likely killed at least a year prior to her discovery. It's believed that the victim was a petite black woman in her early 40s. Although this isn't definite, a young man came forward in April of that following year, stating that he thought the remains were of his mother, Rose Wallace. He specifically noted the gold dental work that the victim had was much like his mom's. So there are 13 victims linked to this same case, although I've only found details on 8 of them. And some believe that the victim count could easily surpass 20. Again, we know this case is unsolved, but we do also know a few things about the monster behind the killings. This is thanks to profiling, of course. The suspect is familiar with human anatomy. He knows his way around Cleveland, specifically the Kingsbury Run area. He has to be big and strong to easily subdue and carry his victims. Remember how I said there wasn't blood at the first couple of scenes, so he would have to carry them somewhere, get them somewhere, kill them, and then carry their bodies back to wherever the crime scene was. He most likely lives in a nearby neighborhood and works a job that involves knife work because his cuts are precise and purposeful. There is a small possibility that this isn't a lone serial killer, which could actually have to do with the ability to subdue and carry his victims. Maybe it's more than one person. Although no one has been charged with the murders, we do have a couple persons of interest. A man that was connected to our victim named Florence, he was arrested in July of 1939. His name, Frank Dolezal. He was a 52-year-old immigrant bricklayer. At some point, Frank confesses to the murder, but he later recants, saying that he was put through rigorous questioning and poor treatment. Sadly, he commits suicide before a decision can be made, although some people believe the suicide was actually staged. They did an autopsy on him, and we learned that he had 6 broken ribs, all of which occurred while he was in police custody. Also, interesting fact is that Frank was 5 feet 7 inches, and where he was hanging in his cell was only 5 feet 7 inches off the floor. Our second suspect, and the one that closely fits the profile, is Dr. Francis Edward Sweeney. He's a highly skilled surgeon from the Cleveland area. Detectives bring him in and examine him with a polygraph test. And he wasn't questioned by just anyone, mind you. Leonard Killer performed the exam, and he's the inventor of the modern polygraph. In his words, Francis was our guy. Unfortunately, there was not enough evidence to actually convict Francis. Plus, he was family to a congressman, and I'm pretty sure we all know how sometimes that can go. Well, after his interrogation, Francis voluntarily commits himself to a mental institute, and that's where he would remain until he passes away in 1964. So we have 2 persons of interest, but no conviction. Now, before we wrap this up, there's one interesting fact I would like to share. It has to do with one of the detectives on the case, Elliot Ness. He's a federal prohibition agent and one of the guys responsible for the famous mobster Al Capone's arrest. Elliot's team was known as the Untouchables. Yet even this legend of a detective couldn't figure out who the person behind these murders was. I believe he was convinced, though, that Francis Sweeney was the culprit. In case you do your own research, you should know there are a few other monikers associated with this case. Since several of the victims are found in the same location, some refer to this as the Kingsbury Run murders. There's also the Mad Butcher, or the simplest terminology of torso killings. In my own searching, I call this the Cleveland torso murders. So as for where this case stands today, in August of 2024, a medical examiner teamed up with a nonprofit DNA Doe project. They've started exhuming victims from this case, hoping to identify them with genetic DNA testing. This is still ongoing, and just so you know, more than 1,500 people have been interviewed. Thousands of leads followed, yet absolutely no definitive answers. The case remains open and unsolved to this day. I hate that we know so few of the victims' names. It's hard to imagine something so brutal happening when things were already bad because of the recession. To think there was a monster on the loose doing unthinkable things to his victims and never prosecuted. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you have any theories or any details worth sharing? You can connect with us on Instagram, WordPress, or Patreon. Just search for the Shrouded in Darkness podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning into the show. And if there's a case from your hometown that deserves attention, send it to us. You can tune in next week as we dive into the case of Dior Kunz Jr. Until next time, ghouls, remember, the truth is always hiding in the darkness.